The Union Budget for the financial year 2025-2026 is out. In this video, let us break it down.
Honorable Speaker, I present the budget for 25-26.
Before we look at the announcements made in this budget, let us first look at the state of economy going into this budget, because that will help us get a better idea of what the budget comes in the economic backdrop of. India's GDP growth as of Q2 financial year 2025, which is in the months of July, August and September, was 5.4%, which is basically a recent time low. This slowdown was also apparent when we look at the corporate revenue and corporate profitability of a lot of companies. Car sales were lower and even FMCG sales were lower. FMCG stands for fast moving consumer goods such as personal care items like soaps, shampoos and even processed food. Now talking about this, there are a lot of things to blame, such as the high rainfalls in that period, the heat wave, the elections and so on. But the big factor which I believe is severely underlooked is lower levels of government spending. Government spending in the first half of the last financial year, or rather the financial year that we are currently in, it was less than 30%, 29.4% to be precise. We only spent 29.4% of our allocated fiscal deficit, which honestly is a recent time low and is also surprising because we are usually used to spending over the fiscal deficit targets and not lower than that. Anyway, in addition to this, even an MFI crisis has been brewing in our economy. MFI stands for microfinance, which is basically giving out small value of loans to people with low income. In the recent times, there has been a lot of availability of loans in this segment, particularly because it attracts the highest interest rates, as high as 25%. And it is very funny how the lowest income sections in our country are forced to pay the highest interest rates, as high as 25%. So basically, a lot of NBFCs and new fintechs jumped into this bandwagon to give out loans to this segment. And basically, this segment over-borrowed. The average customer had taken as many as 7 to 8 loans from different NBFCs and fintechs. Since then, there have been curbs placed to curtail this, but the damage has already been done. The defaults in this segment have been on the rise. So going into this budget, the government primarily had to find a way to increase consumer spending, because consumer spending also results in higher private capex. Why? Because if consumers demand more, companies would be forced to accommodate supply as well, for which they will have to increase their capacities. So now in the backdrop of this economic situation, let us see what the budget brings to us. For this part, I'm going to be referring to the notes that you saw me making. And let us first address the elephant in the room, the tax changes which you've probably already come across. So for now, till the income of 12 lakh rupees, you would no longer be expected to pay any taxes. This figure stood at 7 lakhs before, and a direct impact of that would be felt in consumption. And as a result of that, FMCG stocks like ITC, HUL and Nestle already rallied as soon as this announcement was made. The income tax brackets overall have also been changed, and now it's 30% tax for an income of over 24 lakh rupees as against 15 lakh rupees before. But what this also means is that the government is foregoing a lot of the money. They are foregoing nearly 1.5 lakh crores in tax revenue, and it is going to be felt in government capex. The allocated budget for government capex is 11.2 lakh crores as against 11.1 lakh crores as of this financial year. This kind of suggests that the government is moving the burden of economic growth to the private sector a little more now than the government itself, and it's honestly justified considering the tax cuts that have come along. To top it all off, there have also been a couple of changes in the TDS and TCS procedures, which honestly are a very welcome move. I, from my personal experience of running my own business, can't even begin to tell you how difficult TDS compliances sometimes can be. In addition to this, what I also find very surprising is that custom duties for a lot of products have been reduced, and in some cases they have even totally been foregone. Can this really have to do something with Trump coming into power? I really suggest that you check out our video on how Trump 2.0 will have an impact on India. You should definitely check that video out. It will give you a lot of ideas as to what Trump thinks about international trade and India with this respect. I do have a feeling that at least a bit of this could have to do with Trump coming into power. Now let us look at some of the things that the budget talked about in addition to the taxes. And there were 4 things particularly, what the government calls the 4 engines for Viksit Bharat. agriculture, MSME, investing, and exports. Let's look at each one of them individually and spend probably 30-40 seconds on each one of them. With regards to agriculture, the government introduced the Dhanya Dhanya Krishi Yojana. Basically, if you know, India has very poor crop yields, much lower than competitors like China and the US. And in an attempt to increase that, the government now aims to enhance agricultural productivity by developing storage solutions, irrigation facilities, and easing the access to credit for farmers. As a result of that, they'll be able to purchase adequate equipments and basically help increase the agricultural output of the country. This Yojana is expected to help 1.7 crore farmers. Now moving to MSMEs, what the government has done is that they have enhanced the access to credit. Basically a better credit guarantee scheme. They have in particular talked about supporting the toy industry, the footwear industry and the food processing industry with giving them access to better credit and allocating more resources to them. Talking about investing, there are a whole lot of things that they've really paid a lot of attention on. Firstly, developing nuclear energy, particularly for power consumption. The government has targeted 100 gigawatts of nuclear power generation by 2047. Now this is huge. A focus on nuclear energy, in my opinion, was very necessary for India to start targeting because that was one segment which had been ignored for years. In addition to this, they've talked about national centers for upskilling the youth, more seats in IITs, more seats for medical students, and so forth. There has also been a lot of focus on Bihar. They're planning on developing more airports in Bihar and also expanding the current Patna airport. Why is that? Probably because of the elections which are due over there just later this year. There has also been a renewed focus on affordable housing with the government allocating an additional 15,000 crore rupees to it. And lastly, talking about exports. The government has suggested that they would be creating a special committee to help reduce the compliance burden. If done right, this could really go a long way in reducing the red tape in our country. Anyway, that was largely the summary of the budget. One thing which they did not talk about at all was their disinvestment plan. Something which honestly they've just ditched over the last couple of budgets. They're no longer talking about the fact of how being in business is not the government's business. In fact, they're pouring in more money into state companies. Now, I'll have to say that state companies are probably better run than before. They have better ratios like ROEs and so on. But will that always be the case? We don't really know. So I would have liked for them to stick with their disinvestment plan, which they haven't. But anyway, do let me know your thoughts on the budget and if you feel if the reduction in tax rates would be great for the Indian economy and could really aid the Indian economy at this time when our GDP numbers are fairly low. Let me know what you think about the same, and as always, I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. See you again soon. Thanks for watching.